Hey y'all, it's Laura, and welcome back to a new series called Budget Scrapbooking. And the way this series is going to work is we're going to explore some low-cost options for scrapbooking. And for me, that means picking a 12 by 12 paper pad. I'm going to be using this one, which is Paige Evans Whimsical, because it has a lot of icons, a nice bright open color scheme, and cut aparts in the paper pad. So it does not have to be a giant paper pad by any stretch of the imagination. I think this one only has 30 some odd pages in it. Not too bad. If you have a smaller paper pad, that will work as well. You won't need to use all of the papers inside. But those are the qualifications I would use when choosing a paper pad for this series if you want to join in. Now, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be making some DIY embellishments from this paper pad and then scrapping with them. So putting together a small kit and then creating 4 to 5 layouts with that kit. So I hope you enjoy this little series, and let's head over to the desk to see what we're going to be working on today. So for this layout, we're doing a 12 by 12 and using some of the frames that I cut for the original kit. And those are just cut from some wood grain paper. I had included a 6 by 6 piece of wood grain paper with this paper pad just to give myself something a little bit interesting to play with. I do love wood grain, and I used to use a lot of wood veneer pieces, but I've kind of fallen out of love with the 3D look with the bulky layouts for the moment. That could come back, who knows? But for the moment, I've kind of fallen out of love with those. And so I'm sticking to a wood grain paper to get the look of the wood veneer without having the bulk of the wood veneer. And so I've used it to cut out a couple of frames. I've also used it to cut out some tiny shapes and then added them to a very thin piece of chipboard to give them just the teeniest bit of dimension, which gives it, again, the look of wood veneer, but not the actual bulk of wood veneer. And that's worked out pretty well with this kit. I have snuck those onto a lot of layouts. I think I've used all of those little pieces up. And this lovely frame layout is a design that I really enjoy called a column design. And this is part of my go-to designs series. You can find all about the column design on there. I will try to remember to link the column video at the end of this video. It should pop up as a suggestion afterwards. And it is a really easy and fun way to get a lot onto your pages without it feeling busy, without it feeling overly full, like there's just too much going on and your brain doesn't know where to look. And the column design helps to separate the layout into sections. And so your mind can kind of focus on one section at a time, and you don't feel overwhelmed by so much happening on the layout at once. And in this layout, I'm going to take my larger photo of my kiddo Charlie, who has a art sculpture piece that they made at school and painted at school, and I have the picture of Charlie on the left side with the frames behind them, and that's going to be kind of the main photo for this layout. So that's the main focal image. On the right side, I want to put in some journaling, and I want to use quite a few of the word phrases from this budget scrapping kit that I've made. And so I'm going to create a column on the right side that's a lot smaller because I want the focus to be on Charlie. But this right side will be a lot smaller, and it'll essentially be a title area. So they have the title at the top, it's going to have some journaling, and then the two smaller photos that show the sculpture when they were making it, and then after they painted it kind of up close. And that way you can see the sculpture on the right side, but on the left side, it's really just about Charlie. And I really liked that idea, so that's what I'm running with. And using frames can be a great way to create a simple background. Using frames by themselves is another background idea of my go-to design series, and I really, really enjoy using them. I think that they're super versatile. It's a quick and easy way to fill the background space without covering it, because you can leave those frames empty like I'm doing here. Or, as you have seen in an earlier video, I fill them in with scraps. or I fill them in with leftover bits and pieces from my kit, sometimes cut aparts, sometimes ephemera pieces. And so I've done a lot of different ways to fill in these frames. I think they're just a super versatile background builder, and so I really enjoy them. Plus, they give the appearance of layers. Because you're layering one over another, it looks like you're adding so much to the background, and it gives the idea of a 3D pop without actually having a 3D pop. And I really enjoy that. I think that that's a cool effect of these frames and of layering in general. Now, I do use 3 different types of tape. So the tape that I use is just cheap stuff from Amazon. I've tried a lot of different brands and none of it really sticks forever. So keep that in mind. I do buy the 1/2 inch, the 1/4 inch, and the 1/8 inch. So the one I'm using right now is the 1/8 inch, and it's super, super thin, but it saves me so much time not having to cut tape into smaller strips. And I just find it just makes the whole process much faster. And being someone who has ADHD and who's a very busy person in general, I don't have the patience to sit there and do fiddly things on camera. Now, if I want to do fiddly things off camera, I don't have a problem with it because there's no timeline, there's no expectation of perfection in my mind. Not that I try to be perfect, but there's kind of always in the back of your head, you're like, this is going to be on camera. The world is going to see me do this. And so that even though you're not trying to make things perfect, that is kind of in the back of your head at the same time. And sometimes I do enjoy just creating off camera and giving myself the time and the freedom to just experiment without the expectation of making something. And sometimes I just have a play with my supplies. I'm like, oh, well, what could I make? Would this work? Would that work? With no expectation of that someone's going to see this or I'm going to post it. It's just something I'm doing for myself. And I think that's really important for people who do make videos and content for the internet to exercise those creative muscles for yourself and privately as well, so that you don't constantly worry about what other people are going to think about your creative process. So for this lovely layout, I did decide to bring in some of these clouds. Now, this is something I have not used on any of the previous layouts, I don't think. And I really wanted to get a big cluster of these clouds on this layout. So I decided to layer them on top of the frames. And initially I was going to put them behind the frames. And then after thinking about it for a while, I thought, you know what? This kind of subverts your expectation a little. Like, you think of clouds as being a background object. When you're looking at a painting, any sort of artwork, generally speaking, the clouds are the background. And so I liked the idea of making the clouds the foreground. I thought that was kind of fun, something a little bit different. And so when I put them on top of the frames, I was like, yeah, actually this looks really cool. And so I just went with it. Now, this is the last little DIY embellishment here that I'm playing with, and it didn't fit onto this layout, I don't think. Maybe it did. I'm actually not sure. But I used all of the DIY embellishments, and you'll see them on the layouts. If you go through all the process videos, you'll see them pop up. But I will do a flip through at the end of the month of all the layouts we made with this kit. And so you can see all how the DIY embellishments were used, how the titles were used, because I used all of the titles that we made have been used up on these layouts. And I really, really like how this one in particular came out. Now, that Believe in the center at the bottom was a cut apart piece that I trimmed down to fit inside of the frame. And then I'm just going to tuck the lovely little clouds around it. Now, I do end up creating a couple of clusters that were a little bit more than just the clouds. So I did one down here at the bottom left, and then I'm going to do another one up at the top left. And then I think there was a third one next to the other tiny photos on the right side. So you kind of have your triangle of 3 larger embellishment clusters that kind of pull your eye around the page, but they always, in my layouts, almost always center around the photo or photos. And the reason for that is because I don't want to draw attention away from the photos. The photos are the point, they're the reason that I scrap. And so for me, I almost always bring those clusters in fairly close and tight to the photos. Now for the title, I did have a couple of titles left here. One of them was Create and Artsy. So I had two titles, Create and Artsy, and I decided to fill in between them with some of the word phrases that are at the top of my little embellishment tray. Now, if you're looking for a tray to dump out your embellishments in and keep track of them in so they don't mess up your desk and go everywhere, and so you don't have to keep like opening and closing your packaging, these embellishment trays, this is literally just a garnish tray, or, you know, the little thing you put sauces in. And that's all it is. It's just plastic. It's from Amazon. I believe I have it linked in the description box of every video because I get questions about it a lot. And I love it. It's very inexpensive. And I think it comes in like a 3 or 4 pack, something like that. So I have one for every kit that I have on the go. So this kit has one. My Pocket Page kit has one. My design team for Cocoa Vanilla has one. And that way I don't have to keep opening packages, which for me, super helpful. Super nice, and they stack. So even when you have like a handful of embellishments in there, you can stack them up, and so it keeps all the little bits and pieces from flying out too easily. But I definitely do something like this. Get you some little bowls, get you a little tray like this. If you find you're just making a mess and you're having to open and close packs over and over and over again, go ahead and get something like this and set this up with your kit, or just set it up next to your scrappy space. And I find I reach for this so often because it's there, it's open, it's available, it's easy to flip through. I love it. Moving back to the layout, well, I'll stop gushing about my embellishment tray. But I really wanted to get a lot of these little creative, crafty icons onto this layout. So I got some clouds on the left side. On the right side, I stuck to these creative, crafty elements. So I'm going to bring in even some things that don't necessarily have anything to do with sculpture making or painting, but I am going to bring them in anyway. So I'm going to bring in, I think I brought in a hole punch and possibly a glue gun and the paintbrush applied. And I think I put in like a pen or a pencil in there, just whatever little bits and pieces would fit, and kind of stuck them back behind those photos. Now, in the past, I've taken a very literal approach to the icons that I use in collections on my pages. So for example, I have difficulty using up a lot of food icons on my layouts because I don't normally scrapbook food. I don't normally scrapbook pictures of food. It's very rare. And so when I get collections that have a lot of food items in them, I'm always a little bit hesitant to use those on pictures like this that are just of sculptures and of artwork that the kids are doing. That's a very common thing that I take photos of, everyday photos. And so that gets a little bit tricky for me, but I am getting a little bit better about looking at those items through the lens of their color and their shape instead of just the literal item that they are. And sometimes I will punch them into shapes that are a little easier for me to use if I know I'm not going to use that icon for something else, so just use them for their color. And other times I can tuck them in such a way that you can't even tell what they were. They're just a little burst of color within a cluster of embellishments. And other times I just tell myself, go for it. It looks cute, use it, and stop overthinking. Overthinking, in my opinion, is the enemy of creativity. And so quite often, if I find myself getting too analytical with my scrapbooking, I will take a step back and I'll say, oh, hold on. We need to be in the right frame of mind for creative pursuits, and this is not it. So sometimes you got to do that with yourself. Sometimes you just got to take a step back. Calm the mind, find some way, music if you need to, videos if you need to, whatever will let you kind of relax and get out of that analytical mind space, because that's what, in my experience, leads to criticism, and usually unfair criticism of your work. And so that is definitely something I try to avoid. Now, my titles are a little bit wonky up at the top, that top one especially. It would not have fit otherwise, but what this technique is called, where it's up and down, is a bouncing baseline. And so, of course, the baseline is the line that goes across the letters. And so the bouncing baseline does create kind of a wavy effect, if you will, kind of what I imagine chevrons look like, the up and the down. And it does work. It makes those things kind of scrunch together a little bit, but especially with the paper that I've used for these letters that has had this beautiful stripe, it looks pretty cool, and I think it's still fairly readable and cohesive to have that create in a bouncing baseline style. But also you'll notice that I kept everything else pretty low key. I did not do the bouncing baseline on Artsy because I didn't need to. I did not do the bouncing baseline on anywhere else because for me that makes it too busy. If I'm going to have a busy area of a layout or a busy title, busy word, then I try to isolate it so it's the only one that's like that, and that helps to soften the overall effect of the layout. It doesn't draw too much attention to itself because it's the only one, because of the color scheme of it. Now, if all of those letters were different colors, then it would draw a lot of attention to itself. But because they're all the same, it doesn't really, like you see it, like, oh, okay, but you don't just stare at it. Your whole brain isn't drawn directly to it. Now, finishing up this layout with some scattering and splattering. For the scattering on this one, I used some teeny tiny little punch stars that I had punched out of the scraps in my kit, and then I'm bringing in some Nuvo drops in black to do some butterfly trails. This is also tying in that little bit of black in Charlie's shirt into the background, just a little bit more, and then some gold Nuvo and gold ink spray. And that is it for this one, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed it. This series has been so much fun. You have one more video coming up for sure, possibly another. We'll see if I get to the last one, but I did make for sure 5 layouts with this kit, and that was the goal, was 4 to 5. And so if I get a 6th one, awesome. If not, that's okay. Until next time, bye y'all.